nosotros porque somos seres humanos que sentimos y que tenemos dolor y que de muchas cosas que dicen en las redes y que dicen en muchos lugares, que no crean que nosotros somos delincuentes, nosotros somos personas que queremos salir adelante.
She says that she wishes Donald Trump wouldn't refer to them as in a racist way, that they're human beings that just want to provide for their kids. We are human beings. That is her message. And I spoke to organizations on the ground here, Mika, like Raíces Texas, who tell me this could be a first glimpse into Donald Trump's Maine and Mexico policy. Now, mind you, migrants don't have to be fenced in while they wait. These families are made to wait years, if not months, to process their asylum. That is what one Mexican state has decided to do. A strategy that be replicated here in Mexico. Mika?
MSNBC's Mariana Atencio, thank you very much. And Mariana's reporting will be a part of a special look at what's really happening at the border tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern on All In. And joining us now, Reverend William Barber. He is president of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of National Poor People's Campaign. And we thank you for being on this morning. It's hard not to look at what's happening at the border. When you look at Mariana's report, you hear the stories of the separations of children. Two worries come to mind. Number one is, what is the part we're not seeing that's happening to these human beings?
You know, I've been to the border. I was there. I actually walked in the middle of the Rio Grande with a family who had not, a woman who had not seen her husband and her children for 16 years. I said there when I reached through the post, I guess, and touched the hand of a child, that this was sin of the highest order, because I'm a Christian evangelical. I grew up in the Christian faith, and one of the most clear public policies that you're supposed to engage in as a just society is fairness toward the strangers and the immigrants. We see this wall and what's happening and this attack on children, and we know it's brown children. It wouldn't be happening if it wasn't brown children at the southern border. Is white supremacy, white nationalism being implemented in our public policy right in front of our faces.
Well, and the second fear, I'll pass it to Katty, it feels like all of these policies are steeped in, just as the Reverend said, racism.
Reverend, when you speak to your congregations about issues like this, about the children being separated on the border, is there any sympathy for policies of trying to keep them out of the country, of separating them from their parents? Are people indignant? Are they mobilized around these issues in the Christian church? Is there a feeling that policies on immigration have been too restrictive for asylum seekers?
Well, too often what we hear, those who are loud, who call themselves the religious right, are very much religious wrong, because they actually practice a form of theological malpractice by not understanding that in public policy, Orthodox religion is clear. You're supposed to be on the side of the poor, the stranger, the sick, the least of these. So yes, people are very hurt, they're crying, they know what is happening. They say it is so wrong for a country of immigrants to be hating on immigrants. It's so wrong for people who are the descendants of immigrants who want to put policies in place. If those policies were in place in the 1920s and the early 1900s, their own grandmothers and grandfathers couldn't go here. People also know that a lot of the reasons people are fleeing places are because of our own bad war policies and our own national policies that happened during the Reagan administration. I mean, people are not ignorant. They see what is clearly going on. This is about white nationalism. This is about the changing demographics of America. This is about voting. This is somebody who is showing us what racist policy looks like. And that's one of the things I want to talk more about, Mika, is policy. We often think racism is like a picture or a word. But what we are seeing is policy.
Exactly.
Policy. Like today, for instance, this is the 2060th day that the Congress has refused to fix the VRA. 2060th day. Now, we call Strom Thurmond a racist, and he only filibustered the 1957 Civil Rights Act for one day. For 2,060 days, McConnell, Ryan, Boehner have blocked fixing the Voting Rights Act, which means we have less voting rights protection today than we had in 1965. Policy racism. When you cut health care and you know that it will have a disparate impact on brown people and black people, that's policy racism. when you know that voter suppression is happening in 26 states, and as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said when they cut the Section 5, she said that's like putting up your umbrella in the middle of a rainstorm just because you're not getting wet. But here's the irony of all of this, and where we have to make the connection. The same people that are pushing these policies against immigrants, the same persons like Trump and his enablers that are pushing these policies of racialized voter suppression, then turn around and use the power that they receive by dividing people, as Dr. King said, dividing black and white people who have the very opportunity to make a change, and hurt mostly white people. The majority of the people that are hurt when you deny health care are white. The majority of the poor people, there are 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this country, the majority of them are white. So they fool people to vote for them because of, I hate immigrants, and immigrants are the problem, and we're trying to protect the vote. And they get a certain amount of votes, then they turn right around, and every one of these states, for instance, the border states and the voter suppression states are also states that have low health care access. And most of the people that are not being helped are white. And we've got to challenge that myth. That's why we got to really deal with racism, not as cultural only and pictures and words, but policy racism.
On racism, it's come to the forefront in recent weeks, both past and present, of what's happened in the state of Virginia. You've written about this. We've had the governor and other officials admitting to using blackface in the past. What can be done? Is there anything they can do? You write in your op-ed about repenting. What does that mean? Well,
repenting in the Bible, in the story of Zacchaeus, when he wanted to have salvation come, Jesus said, okay, restore what you've done. So some people said earlier, resign, resign, resign. I stepped back and said, wait a minute. Because if you resign and resign to resign, you only get to somebody who participated in racist voter suppression. So if the issue is resigning because of racism, for instance, the entire Republican legislature in North Carolina has to resign because they were found guilty in the courts of surgical racism. So let's step back a second. The repentance could be Northam doing a major speech on what racism really is, and then immediately laying out policy. For instance, he could say the Union Hill African-American community where environmental racism is happening because of the Atlantic pipeline, I'm going to no longer support that pipeline. I'm going to go after pressure. Now, I'm going to fight for same-day registration, early voting in Virginia, and automatic registration. I'm going to look at the issue of public education and mass incarceration, not just look at it, but now. But just having an apology is not enough. And just only talking about, and I challenge the media, if we only talk about racism when somebody talks about the size of someone's calves or a picture 30 years ago, we are not dealing with disparate impact and real racism that's happening. We need to look at what's happening in the appointment of these federal judges on the courts. We need to look at disparate treatment in health care, the disparate treatment in living wages. 62 million Americans make less than a living wage. 54% of them are African American. We need to look at all of this voter suppression happening across the country. So we need to have a real serious depth focus on racism and how that ties to systemic poverty, ecological devastation as well, the war economy, militarism, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism.
And part of that is knowing our history. And as we recognize Black History Month, Reverend Barber, today you wanted to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. And specifically his speech in Montgomery after Selma and the fight for voting rights. So I have the stage. Tell us more.
First of all, we have to get past just I have a dream. I have a dream was the vision. He spoke 17 minutes before that talking about the problems. When he got to Montgomery under the threat of death, Dr. King gave one of his most brilliant sermons. In that sermon, he said something, he did a diagnosis that helps us today. He said, every time there is the possibility for poor whites and working class whites and poor blacks and working class blacks, and I'm paraphrasing, to join together and build a more just society, he said the Bourbon class or the aristocracy sows division. We do that right now because for years the South has been under this Southern strategy, that, the solid South. It doesn't have to be that way. Those states are not red states. They're unorganized states. They're states where people have not found a way to come together. And they're not going to come together left and right, conservative versus liberal. We need a moral fusion movement that Dr. King talked about, where black people and white people and brown people understand if you're poor and you can't pay your light bill, we're all black in the dark.